Are we live? I think we're live, everybody. Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome everybody to Brainfood on Tour. Now I'm in Singapore. I'm in like the tiniest hotel room ever. As you can see, I'm desperately trying to hide my bed here. But this is all of the room. Just to let you know, apologies for the lighting, apologies for the background, all of that stuff. But I wanted to do this a show regardless of where I was going to be in terms of accommodation. Because it's very important for us to have conversations with local recruiter communities, particularly ones that we don't often hear in my neck of the woods. I'm in the UK. I hear a lot about UK. I hear a lot about US. I don't know anything about hiring in ASEAN. Don't know anything about hiring in Singapore. So whilst I'm in this wonderful country, it would be wrong of me not to be able to speak to local recruiters on screen and learn from them what it is to be a recruiter here in this place. So today, folks, we are Brainfood on Tour. It is how to hire in Singapore in 2025. I hope you can hear and see me okay. So let's do some sound checks first of all before we do that. Just want to make sure that the audio and visual is fine. Let me know in the chat whether you can hear and see me okay, by the way. Just a quick thumbs up or something to say, yes, Hong, you're loud and clear. We should also be broadcasting this live on a number of channels. So Steve Young, thank you for also live streaming this. I think Martin Warren is doing the same. I'm also live streaming this on my LinkedIn. So let me just check whether the LinkedIn is firing okay. And am I actually doing it? Am I live? Let me know in the comments, by the way, whether you can see me in LinkedIn. You know what? I'm not there. Oh, yes, I am. That's all right. Cool. I think I'm there. Fine. Looks like we're all good. All right, folks. Thank you so much for everyone joining in and saying, yes, everyone here is fine. Let's, without further ado, just bring on our guests because there's no point in me doing too much talking. I actually don't know what I'm doing here. The question for us that we want to answer today is, if I actually did get a job as a recruiter in Singapore and I started tomorrow, what are the 10 things I've got to know in order to be a success here? Let's figure that out. The only way we're going to figure this out is bringing on some of our guests to talk to us through it. So I'm going to try and make this open mic, by the way. I'm going to bring on some guests now, but if you want to come on, just raise your hand or possibly just come on screen and we'll get you involved. No reason why anybody should not feel comfortable in joining it, joining on screen if you're up for it. But firstly, we're going to bring on some guests who've said already they're going to do it. We'll do this, this, and this. Who else have we got here? I'm missing somebody. Is Aki here? I don't think he is. Don't worry. Eve, I might just bring you on. How about that? All right, Eve, you're coming on. There we go. Martin, good to see you, sir. Thank you so much for the wonderful suggestion yesterday, by the way. Wonderful to hang out with you and the rest of the crew. I hope you got home okay yesterday, actually, mate.
I got home okay, thanks, hon. Thanks for coming out. It was a good night.
Yeah, excellent stuff. Martin, for the people who don't know you, can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Yeah, so originally from Australia, been up in Singapore now for about 12 years. My background is all talent sourcing mainly. And up until recently, I worked at Grab for the last 7 years. So that's my background in a nutshell.
Yeah, yeah, fantastic stuff. Martin working at probably globally one of the most famous sort of ASEAN centered businesses. Everyone uses Grab here, absolutely vital service. We have Hannah lloyd-goh here as well. Hannah, wonderful to see you. Can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Hi, sure. So, can you hear me okay, by the way?
Yeah, it sounds good.
Super. So, my name is Hannah, and I've recently founded my own business in Singapore called Inimitable Talent. I largely focus on executive hiring for tech companies, either early stage or high growth. I've been in Singapore now for around 5 years. I moved over here with BCG Digital Ventures, ran TA there for a period of time, and then since then I've worked on a variety of consulting projects for both international MNCs and also local firms as well.
Fantastic stuff. Great to have you on the show, Hannah. I'm going to bring on Steve Young here as well. And let me just open this up. The host controls. What can we see here? Open to stage, allow raise hands. Sure, I think everyone just walk on if they fancy. Yeah, let's just take a risk. Okay, good. We have Steve here as well. Steve, wonderful to see you. We might as well get straight into intros. Quick one-liner. Who are you, Stephen? What do you do?
Yeah, I'm doing some volunteer work for an NGO called She Loves Data. Been in recruitment for about 20 years. So that's my one-liner.
Perfect. Probably wanted 2 lines from you, Stephen, but it's all good. Wonderful to see you, man. Brilliant stuff. Okay, we have Fiona Warren here as well. Fiona, wonderful to see you on the chat. I will be in Australia, incidentally, for about 3 weeks in March. So we better get together. All right, cool. Let's talk about it. Singapore. I want to talk to Martin and Hannah first as people who've kind of come from outside and learned how to do it here. Let's take your take first, then we'll go with Steve in terms of, okay, what does it look like from the local upwards? Let's go with you first, Martin. As a recruiter in who's got experience outside of Singapore and within Singapore, what was the things that surprised you most when you first arrived, and what is it that you had to do to kind of equip yourself to be a success here?
Wow, I have to remember back to that time. So I think probably the biggest difference that, and I'm going back now, 12 years, the biggest difference I noticed was coming from Australia. Singapore, in terms of recruitment, was probably a bit behind Australia in terms of their evolution and how they went about recruiting. So that was probably the biggest challenge. The sorts of things that I was doing in Australia and talking about and trying to implement, I really had to dumb down a bit here. But what I'd also say is that Singapore has caught up very, very fast. So that's probably the biggest challenge. The second one would be the different cultures. Like if you're dealing with Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, Singapore, whatever, across this region, the cultures are quite different in terms of how you interact with people, asking them questions, things like that. So that was probably the 2 learnings for me when I first came to Singapore to learn. And the recruiting, the legal laws and that were quite similar, so there was no real big differences there. So that's probably what I noticed most.
Yeah, really interesting. So basically, the Singapore basically is stuck right in the middle of this economic region, and oftentimes draws talent from a number of different countries, people with different languages, different legal structures, and so on. Obviously, also big expat type of sort of pipeline as well. So there's lots of kind of international sort of diversity that you have to deal with as a recruiter here, which may not be the case, let's say, in Australia, perhaps, or New Zealand, or wherever it might be. So Yeah,
Right.
cool,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Same question to you, Hannah. Actually, no, before we go to Hannah, we've got Aki here. Aki, wonderful to see you. Can you quickly introduce yourself, who you, what it is you do? And Eve, you need to stick your camera on. I know it's early in the morning, but, you know, we're live streaming, my dear. Okay, Aki, go ahead.
Hey, and first, I apologize for the technical difficulties, but it's good to be here. Thanks for having me, Hung, and good to see Martin and Hannah, Steve and Eve. Hello. I'm based in Singapore. Hello. I've been here 12 years, like Martin, and I'm originally from New York. I spent the first really 4 years at Uber, building out different TA teams in the region, including my own. And then I was at Netflix for the better part of 5 years, doing much the same, just hiring around the region from a pretty nascent stage. And then 3 years ago, I started my own company, which is called Town Stories. And it's a mix of a weekly newsletter that goes out and talks about the seismic changes happening and advisory work that I do with organizations that are typically doing well, but haven't figured out the people piece just yet. So that's me.
Fantastic stuff, Aki. Welcome to the show. Just shared his link into the chat stream. Make sure you connect with him. And look, it's Eve. Eve, you look fantastic. Why was that camera not on as default? What's going on? It's okay, Eve. Why don't you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Thanks for putting me on the spot. Hey, morning, everyone. Yes, I'm Eve. I live and base here in Singapore. So have been in the TA line for over 18 years. Very passionate in the tech industry and have always been hiring for GTM type of roles for the organizations. So currently I'm running the APAC TA's team for sales only. Yeah, thank you.
Fantastic stuff. Okay, cool. Let's switch to, we're going to go to Hannah for the kind of, expat in style sort of experience. What's your view of it? Like, how would you advise yourself if you could go back in time to just speed yourself up in terms of productivity?
Yeah, sure. So not so much of a veteran as Martin, but I definitely remember that when I came over 5 years ago, I probably underappreciated the cultural differences. And I'm really still learning today. Like, I think this is a work in progress for anyone who hasn't, grown up here. And so those cultural differences and ways of working, I think, was definitely something to get used to. And also my own personal style of interviewing. So checking my own biases, kind of understanding how people present an interview. I think this is huge. And if I could go back in time, I would definitely have spent more time kind of appreciating those differences. And then I think the second call out was when I arrived 5 years ago, I was really focused on tech hiring in, largely product and engineering. And, in the UK, I'd been in Berlin as well for a couple of years. We always felt that the competition for talent was really fierce. It is definitely pronounced here. I think that is a reflection of the maturity of the tech ecosystem here as compared to places like Silicon Valley and Europe. And it just meant that finding people who had worked in those domains was much more challenging. So I would say the competition for talent here is maybe more fierce than it had been in other regions within the sector I was working in. So there would be like two call-outs, I think.
Really interesting. We'll talk about market size and size of the labor pool in a second, but let's get some detail as to what you mean about cultural differences. That's a nebulous term. Like, let's be honest and straight. Like, what were the differences? How, you know, what are the things that people need to know? If I sort of got a job tomorrow and I was like on the phone speaking to people, like, what do I need to know in order for me to be effective?
Yeah, I think it's a really nuanced conversation, right? So I hope I don't overstep the boundaries and say something inadvertently offensive. But I definitely think that in local cultures, there is an optimization for social cohesion and harmony. You know, I think that when you work in a US firm or you're working in a kind of US style firm, there's perhaps a preference for more direct styles of conversation. What I've discovered here is you have to understand the meaning behind the meaning of what's being said. And also have to understand that decisions aren't necessarily taken in the room in meetings, but the decisions has already been made by the time you go into the meeting. And also perhaps it reflects in the style in which candidates interview, like as a generalization, and this is like really as a general average, I find candidates here to be much more humble about their accomplishments and achievements, versus if I'm interviewing somebody in the US and they'll be like, this is all the incredible impact I've had in these roles, they'll be super direct with you. I find sometimes here I really have to draw out of candidates kind of, you know, what have you achieved, what have you accomplished. There's more humility, there's more a sense of kind of what has the team done. This is a generalization, okay, so I'm talking in generals, but they're the things that I noticed. So sometimes
don't worry about like these massive broad strokes you're painting here, Hannah. We're all good here. Let's get into stereotyping. I love it. But I do love it because we do need to be strong enough to talk about generalizations. We caveat everything to the nth degree, and we'll never get anywhere. But what you're saying here tells me, like, okay, this is like Erin Meyer's culture map. It's like, okay, we've got some indirect communication style, let's say, definitely having a public confrontation. I mean, I know this being a kind of an East Asian person myself, having a direct confrontation publicly is the worst thing you could do. You just don't do that because it's humiliating for somebody, and you don't want to ever create a humiliating situation. You don't create a win-lose situation because that feels like a lose-lose for everyone. You got to give people basically multiple off-ramps if you're having a disagreement, and allow graceful retreats, graceful exits. That in the Western style, and sorry, Aki, to bring the US guys in, but the US are very confrontational in my experience, in the sense that they're prepared to have like fairly adversarial interactions just to get to the point more quickly, and then move on. And it doesn't necessarily destructive to relationships, but I would imagine using that style could be destructive to relationships in different parts of the world. And I think it would be in East Asia, certainly East Asia, I know, but Singapore perhaps as well, given the roots here. What are your thoughts on Hannah's perspective there? Do you endorse that? Bring in the US perspective, Aki.
Yeah, completely. I think, look, I think of it as a spectrum, and this is a bit of the Aaron Myers culture code, culture map spectrum, which is, I would put many of the cultures that she does in Asia on one end of the spectrum. Then I think you can and should go all the way to the Hollands of the world, right? The Dutch, for instance, are notoriously direct and and then you feel like, okay, I get why I'm sort of here in between, which I am. I'm from the US. So I think that's where I would situate that American candor. I think there are cultures which are even more direct. And what I think the other caveat I would throw out there, Hung, is even in the context of the US, like I bring a very tech bias. Tech values that candor. Tech values that ability. Feedback is a good thing. Messing up is a good thing. Those are a whole host of values which are quite unique to Silicon Valley, I would say. They're really not necessarily part of even New York finance culture, as a for instance, right?
Really, really important point. It's sectoral as well, isn't it? And because the radical candor culture, all of that stuff's actually been generated from SaaS product businesses in the US, and it's been promulgated globally as the way to do things. But number one, it may not land particularly well particular regions, but we can also imagine it may not land well in different sectors. I mean, could you do radical candor in a legal firm? I mean, I doubt it, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's. I mean, for instance, I worked in a very radical culture at Netflix. By my standards, it was candid, even relative to Google, right? So those are two tech companies. Again, there's a spectrum that exists, and then I think when bringing these cultures, and we are, by the way, at least in my case, I'm literally bringing these cultures from other parts of the world, namely the United States, and helping plant them, but also sort of set them in the context of Asia. I think it's just really important to remember that. And there are things you can do to make that process healthier, explain context and so on and so forth. But I think it's important to remember that is the fundamental exercise. And it's not about better or worse. It's just different. And it's different even in the US.
Yeah, very good. Okay, let's bring in Stephen here. And Stephen first. You guys just being like massively stereotyped here. So okay. I'm joking. It's all good. We have another incomer here. It's all good. All welcome. We'll have to wait your turn for it. But Stephen, give me your take on this. We've got people saying actually communication style is different. The behavior style is different. Is that true? And if so, who needs to adapt to who? Is there a way to play this as a recruiter? What do you need to know?
Yeah, I mean, it's So it's a loaded question, right? But I totally agree with Martin, Hannah, Aki, right? I think somewhere in between we need to come together. I mean, I'll give you an instance. If I were to have a weekly call, with my team of recruiters around Asia, let's say there are 5, 6 of them, right? And I'm telling them that we're gonna implement a new AI product. Generally, I think the room is going to be really quiet. And if you really want to get a sense of what they're thinking, you need to have that one-on-one conversations, right? Offline, maybe over coffee or another virtual chat to really get an understanding of what they're thinking about. Because I think, generally, I think for a lot of East Asians, with the exceptions of Indians, I mean, I'm not pointing them out, right? But I think
I'm
like
having a
that,
special case India.
Yeah,
India needs
like,
special case.
Yeah, I like that vibe, right, from India, in which they speak their mind, right, which is good, very Western. But I think in East Asia, sometimes in really to try to get the nuances, you need to have that one-on-ones. To Aki's point about sectorial, I can give you an example. 6 months ago, I was heading recruitment in Asia with the Tony Blair Institute, right, which is a political consulting company. And coming from a tech recruitment world to more policy government, how interviewing is done is very nuanced. It's very subjective because it's tougher to look at someone's policy background. And that was a kind of a shift as well culturally. So, I'm kind of an echo chamber of what everyone else is saying, but maybe Eve has a different point of view. So,
Yeah, I think fundamentally we are in a world that we need to interact. It's a humane job, right? And especially where we thrive in these diverse cultures, hirings and hiring managers' behaviors are totally different from even New Zealand and Australia is also very different, even though they sit together. They are more close knitted and they are really far removed from a lot of places. Like this morning, I just had a call with a hiring manager. He's based in Seattle and he's hiring in Singapore. He knows nothing about Singapore. He's Indian national, but this is where I am, that I have to be myself and I represent Red Hat. We're all Red Hatters. We operate with our open fundamentals, open leadership policies, and we want to hire people of the same tribe and DNA. So I'm not trying to sell Red Hat here, but I'm a true believer of transparency now, and that is the reason why open source is really thriving in the businesses today. Going back to hirings in this diverse culture, say like for example Thailand, the open management is there, but the way of doing business is also very different. We need local ties, right? You can't have a foreigner, even though you do speak Thai and have a Thai spouse, for instance. And in India, I can get 1,000 applicants. Half of them are maybe internal applicants and referrals, versus Japan, I've got no applicants, right? So, and also the way of hiring managers running businesses are also very different. Some are super open to hear from you, what kind of best practices that you can support me in hirings. Whereas say maybe Indonesia or Thailand or Vietnam, they already know who they want to hire. You need to know how to pick the battles, right? So don't waste energy on things that's not going to work out for you. Yeah,
really good observation. I think one of the things to learn here is that oftentimes we can group certain countries and regions together as one thing, like we said, or Australia, New Zealand, but actually culturally Australia and New Zealand are very different. Similar to US, Canada, like, okay, both North American, probably people outside of North America may even have a difficulty picking out the accent differences and all the rest of it. Behaviorally, culturally, value-wise, actually very, very different. So we can oftentimes be too quick to group ASEAN into one big thing, whereas in fact, no, there's very different countries, and probably within those countries, there's going to be vastly different ethnicities, behaviors, and what have you. And then we get into the sectoral side also. So it seems to me, first thing to know is your ramp-up time is going to be longer. If you land, you're going to have to enculturate yourself a lot more than perhaps people anticipate. It also tells me that if you're trying to recruit from outside of the region, that's going to be like super tough. Like, how are you ever going to get that nuance if you're recruiting from outside in? I mean, is that even possible to do? Is there a fast track way to learn about these cultural differences in a cultural perspective? Or do you think actually that's just a lost cause? Anybody who wants to recruit in Singapore, really, you've got to be here. What are your general thoughts on that?
I think I think it's, if you come to Singapore, once a year to do business, and try and do some business, it's very difficult, right? You've got to be here, you've got to build the relationships, you've got to be on the ground, right? And really get to know people and understand, how it all operates. So I think, if you're outside of Singapore and you're trying to recruit into Singapore, I think, it's possible, but it's difficult because it takes a long time to build that trust and that understanding. So I think you really need to be here.
Yeah, really interesting. Hannah, I want to go to you because you're doing exec type stuff. So I'm assuming there's going to be people moving in and out of Singapore from your talent pool and the people that you kind of bring in. Bringing people from outside into Singapore, is that still like an easy sell? Like, once upon a time, it was perceived, yeah, of course, it was fantastic, great. Great weather, great sort of tax infrastructure, very accessible for people who are outside of the Asian region. It's like a great entryway, if you like, for almost anybody who've got English language. Is it still like a big draw, or are there other things that you need to factor in? Are there other kind of objections or questions people are asking you when you're offering opportunities in Sing?
Yeah. I mean, I guess the headline is we're always looking for the best possible candidate for the role, right? And certainly for executive searches, that can sometimes mean a global search, depending on what a client you're working with demands. And so typically I will be looking globally for candidates, both in ASEAN and also perhaps in Europe and US as well. There is a much greater depth, I would say, of talent within the tech scene kind of locally now. So in some cases, it's much easier to find people here, and those people have grown. They're at more senior levels. Is Singapore attractive? I think it's seen as a very politically stable place right now. Like when you look at everything that's happening across the world, Singapore becomes a very attractive place for candidates to be. It's seen as, you know, economically very resilient. It's seen as pretty sheltered from what is kind of going on in the world, and it has a certain degree of neutrality as well. You know, I think Singapore has played the neutrality game very well between the US and China, and so it's seen as a kind of great place to come for candidates. Interestingly, I find that it's also great for female candidates as well, because the cost of childcare here is very accessible to most people. And so for senior women, particularly, coming to Singapore and being able to have a career here is very attractive. And I would say it's a mix. You know, if I look at the searches I've conducted in the past couple of years, I would say probably around 50% of the senior level candidates I've placed have come from the Singapore market or from the local region, and around 50% come from either the US or Europe. So yeah, I think
very interesting.
Yeah,
you could do a destination branding to US women, I would say, to Singapore. I think you get loads of people. I mean, there's a huge problem in the US, obviously with political differences, but that political difference is also gendered, in my opinion. It's very gendered. Like women have really got a problem with Trump. There's no question in my view in that. And there's a lot of people pinging me to say, how do I move to Portugal? Never to UK, by the way. I totally get that. But it's like, how do I move to? I don't know. but there's got to be some. There's an opportunity there to pipeline a lot of talent, I think. Aki, what are your thoughts as a US president? What are your thoughts about that?
I agree. I think I'm glad you made the point, and that is my experience.
I've got a bit of a spotty line with Aki, I'm afraid.
Message has long been resonant with.
Okay, Aki, I think we've got a problem with your internet, my friend. We might need to get a refresh on your Crowdcast there or something. Can you give it,
Men as well, right? Who are part.
All right. Sorry, did I just kick him off? I didn't mean to. Oh, shit. That happens. Sorry, guys. Aki, I'll invite you back. But thoughts on this? Like, can we use destiny? I think these are really powerful benefits, aren't they? Political stability. Suddenly, we all have to care about geopolitics. You know, 5-10 years ago, no one was. You know, everyone's focusing on work. Now actually makes a difference because your lives are going to be changing. Look at all of the US government workers right now, like literally getting an email saying, right, if you don't respond to this in 3 days, you're fired. I mean, that is a huge problem for me. You know what I mean? Suddenly that changes everything. So Singapore doesn't do that. Politically very stable. Of course, you can criticize various things about this, but the reality is most people want stability. That improves investment. I didn't know about the availability of childcare, the affordability of childcare, for instance. That's really important. You look at the cost it takes in the UK and US to get childcare. That's like an extra mortgage. It's like there's not a trivial number. You have to pay a huge amount to do it. So potentially, but bringing people from outside in is there's been some friction there, hasn't there? Tell us about what the legal environment is for that. Eve, you're nodding your head, so let's tell us about this. Like, how do you get an expat into the country? How easy is that? What are the restrictions? What are the changes recently?
Things have changed hugely since COVID. That's my observation. And lots of expats have either left Singapore or they are left hanging here, and the visa runs out and they're not able to renew, so they have to leave. And coming back to Singapore to find a new stint is fairly tough. And especially last night, I was talking to one lady and she was talking about Compass, remember? So this is a very complicated system that really try to motivate local employers here to hire locals, right? But it's really also about retaining the right professional talents here, and therefore we have the one pass. Okay, one pass is actually to retain the strong talents with the right skill sets to be here, right, in every ways. And this is not easy to get, the one pass. So coming back to my personal experience hiring foreign talents, mainly we look inwards. We are actually very open to hire and relocate red hatters all over, actually, and also to move here to Singapore because firstly it's low risk, and purely because also the associate has the ecosystem here, right, within the organization. So that is actually a good start for the both of us, right? We have moved people from Singapore to Portugal, vice versa, so things like that. Yeah, but from pure outside, it's limited to only for technical skill sets, for technical type of roles. Not so much for go-to-market.
All right, let me get the overview here. Can someone give me like a very quick bullet point list of the things that you can do to bring external talent in? Like, what are the visa types that you typically use, and what's the criteria for that? Does anybody like have a quick like mental bullet point list they could just talk on camera about?
Okay, let me give a quick
Go ahead,
stat.
Stephen.
So for most, let's say, senior executives or mid-level, you have what we call the employment pass, EP, right? All of us know about that. That there is, I think, a salary scale as well, which you need to have. So that's the most straightforward way. I remember last year when I was at the Tony Blair Institute, we wanted to get someone actually from London to our Singapore office for a 2-year contract. Right? The EP was not approved, so we wanted to do what is called an intra-company transfer, right? In which you can, jettison someone from London to the Singapore office. We checked with our lawyers, but it was really, really cumbersome. And again, it was rejected by the Ministry of Manpower. One thing I have to say about Singapore's Ministry of Manpower, when they reject a working visa, it is really opaque. They don't give you a reason, right? They'll just say, it's not approved, try again. But, and there's also something called an S-Pass, which is for lower salary ranges. So those are the three broad criteria, really. One thing I have to say that I think for senior staff coming externally into Singapore, generally I think they get better packages. But I think for, let's say, more junior associate folks, 1 to 2 to 3 years experience, I've had issues getting them here in Singapore because of getting a room, renting a condo, a flat can be really expensive right now, which is why I think some companies are gravitating towards putting their talent into Malaysia, into Bangkok, into Vietnam as well.
Yeah, really interesting. Go ahead, Aki.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think there was a time, and we're probably past it, where as a younger professional coming from outside of Singapore, you could make a go of things here. You could get that visa, you could pay that rent, and I think that's less so the case. Number one. Number two, companies only have only so many bullets in the chamber in terms of the EPs they can apply for, and so if I've only got so many EPs that can go around, employment passes, then oftentimes I'm going to need to allocate that to those senior impactful hires. I was just going to make one broader point, which is I think it's really interesting to see the evolution of how Singapore has handled this whole very important question, important on all levels, over the last dozen years that I've been here. It's gotten tougher, but I think they've done an admirable job of, on the one hand, making it, I think it's on the one hand, Singapore understands it needs human capital, right? The birth rate is declining here, like it is in much of Asia, and I think there's that awareness. On the other, it's politically a very hot button topic, like it is all over the world, and so they've put in place a bunch of very thoughtful measures that force you to show intent, that force you to go through some hoops, right? But to be able to say with plausible deniability, we made the effort, and then only then are we bringing people in from the outside. So they are still coming, and they are still needed, but I think there's a lot of fear in an almost healthy way that has to happen in order to do that now, relative to 5, 6, 7 years back.
It's a really important point. I mean, the immigration story is pretty much universal. It looks like there's an economic need to bring more people into almost every country. But then it's politically difficult to do that because there's agitation to say there's too many immigrants. We need to hire local and all this stuff. I think both those cases may be true. We need to figure out how the economic system works, such that we can achieve the right levels of employment for the local talent, but at the same time not deny ourselves of the external talent. That's a very high demand, and that's true for any country. You look at the US as a good example. Look at all of the amazing top level talent that the US typically draws in. All of the AI teams, all of the the leading edge stuff, half of them are non-American, and you think, wow, that's a huge benefit to the country that they've been able to acquire that talent in such a manner. And I would imagine every country should want to do that, and yet at the same time we have this huge anti-immigration wave from the US and produces the governments that we have today. So it's like, okay, the economic story is kind of lost out to the political story here, which is a tough one to manage. Talking about the EPs, is it the case that the company applies for a carnet of EPs that they can then use as they see fit? Or is it a case you've got to find the individual, offer the job, and then apply based on the fact you've got the talent? What's the sequence of events there?
Quickly, it's almost more complex in that you are, on the one hand, looking at the big picture of your overall percentage of Singaporean stroke PR hires relative to EPs. And in the next instance, you're doing a search and you're trying to, you have to make that intent to look in Singapore first. And as that search prolongs, you're wanting and needing to potentially use an EP. But again, then you're indexing to where am I on this overall quota? Where's the organization? So it's a bit of, I find, I don't know what you all find, you're balancing multiple dynamics.
Yeah, so one of the things that's going to do is basically like guarantee job ads, isn't it? It's like the way to demonstrate intent is just to keep publishing job ads, like just as a misaligned incentive. You know, that's the most obvious signal that I, as an employer, say, right, just keep the job constantly on. That tells me I'm trying to recruit locally. Is that one of the things that might happen?
Yeah, Hung, I think you're right. And I can't remember the name of the system, but there is a government job board that we need to go and post on for
My career's future.
Yeah, that's it. I know. Yeah, that's it. So you need to go and post there, and you need to, show real evidence that you're actually, you've interviewed candidates and stuff like that from that. So, but I know, I think a lot of recruiters probably just keep those jobs posted all the time, right? Because they're going to have to, to get ahead of the game a bit. Otherwise, if you're waiting until you find someone, then you have to post and wait 4 weeks. It just stretches everything out. So yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, Eve.
Oh no, I wanted to just chime in that government is watching.
And it's all through the funnel, right, y'all? Meaning it's not just you have to have it open and bring people in. You need to say, this is how many Singaporeans we interviewed. This is how many made it to the next round. If and when you apply for an EP, you need that data. You need that. There's accountability all through the funnel.
Yeah. And I think now, and Eve, you'll know this better than I, but I think the new compass point system, it doesn't just look at kind of Singaporeans, PRs, and non-residents. I think actually it looks at the country makeup of your firm as a whole, as is my understanding. So, if you have too many of one nationality, that raises a red flag, or the EP being applied for, you lose points. Is that right, Eve? Or something like this?
Yeah, a generalization goes like that. Yes, like there will be different weightage for the points for different education and stuff like that, and the income that you're gonna draw and your past life sort of things. Yeah, on a high level. Yes, it's really complicated. Like I normally leave this for my mobility team to handle. Yeah.
Cynically, putting my strategic hat on, I actually think this is a good thing for recruiters, isn't it? Like, it's like we need more recruiters. Like it's one of those laws that creates more work for human recruiters to do. Like if the government tells me I've got to interview X amount of locals, then you know what? I need to go to my boss and say, I can't just do this job as you think I can do it, because in fact, I've got this additional requirement to recruit all of these local people. I need another person to do the interviewing. So in a really weird way, like, listen, globally, TA and recruiting generally is kind of being crushed over the last couple of years in terms of hiring demand, job demand, and so on. But sometimes the government will create laws like this that sort of on the one hand, look, okay, it's causing me problems because it's causing at the company level difficulties for us to recruit. But from a sector point of view, this is actually reasonably positive for us because it means that recruiters are going to be needed to keep doing this work. And I know this sounds, this is kind of like a heretical claim, but I think, isn't this a good thing, guys? What are your thoughts?
I never thought of it that way, but it actually justifies if you want a larger team, and there might even be a case of you know, if you need to interview more people, right? Might even get an agency to do some of the heavy lifting as well. But interesting thought, really.
And maybe this is contrarian, Hung, but like I kind of feel like, going back to Aki's word, thoughtful. Like, the government has put in really thoughtful processes, and as a TA practitioner, when you go and read the fair assessment framework, and they advocate for like non-discriminatory job advertisements, structured interviewing, I mean, these are all really good things that, I mean, I think any TA practitioner would be coaching their own organization to do. Whether it requires more recruiters or not, I'm not quite sure. But I think a lot of these things are a good thing. That may be contrarian. It's like, that's how I feel.
Here's one.
I agree.
Sorry, one thing that's true though, like let's say you're managing a global team, you've obviously got all your recruiters on various performance metrics and KPIs and all this business. Like, you have to factor in some of these local legal obligations, because you can't say that if I'm going to have one global standard as to what I think a recruiter should be doing in terms of numbers of hires a year or whatever it is, guess what? I mean, certain recruiters are going to have different obligations based on these local differences, which is going to change that number. So you've got to have the ability. So it's going to change how we manage different teams. I mean, is anyone here managing a global team? Martin, you did it. It wasn't entirely global, was it? It was kind of, and Aki, you did as well. So did you ever factor that in? I mean, I don't want to sort of say, oh no, I didn't. But did you ever think, okay, maybe a recruiter in Australia is going to need a different sort of set of measures compared to a recruiter in, Thailand or Singapore, wherever?
In a word, yes, absolutely. Like, you had to, I think, apply that nuance. Based on the diversity of the region that we were talking about earlier, you have a recruiter working on an exec search in Japan versus a recruiter working on an entry-level role in India where there's no visa friction and the supply is off the charts. So yeah, absolutely. And then in the case of your Singapore-based recruiters or recruiters working on Singapore roles, you do factor that additional, it's going to take at least 2 weeks just to build the pipeline based on the requirement from the MON, which is the Ministry of Manpower. So the short answer for me was yes, we had to apply that and normalize, or try to normalize.
Yeah, very interesting, folks. Let's do a quick step change shift into candidate acquisition. Most people will obviously think, all right, Indeed or LinkedIn or whatever it is. What's the scenario in Singapore? Like, how do I find people here? I'm assuming LinkedIn is prominent, at least for white collar work. But what else? What other sites need to be cared about here? If either a sourcing or advertising tools. Any quick ones we want to talk about?
So, Hung, maybe I can talk about this first. I think LinkedIn, it's still the dominant place to hunt from in Singapore. I know. Certainly in my past role, a good percentage of our hires came from LinkedIn, from LinkedIn job posts, and also, hunting through LinkedIn. So especially in the tech space, like if you look at some of the job boards, like Indeed, we never really found it great on the tech side. On the non-tech, it was okay. You've got JobStreet, you've got JobsDB, which is now kind of owned or branded as Seek. They're more on the kind of the non-tech side, but again, LinkedIn is really the place, or you just, you're doing your outbound hunting into, the targeted companies that have the caliber of people that you're looking for. So that's kind of how I see it. And obviously, if you work with if your company's got a really good brand, then a lot of inbound through your career site, but generally a lot of that kind of gets fed from LinkedIn anyway, or redirected anyway. So that's kind of my experience with where we're kind of really finding these candidates.
Yeah, cool. Any other networks or any kind of spaces that are worth an outsider to know about as to investigate?
Look, again, it depends what you're looking for, but I think a lot of the communities, if you like, if you're looking for like product people or design people, then the Dribbles and the Behances and that kind of stuff. But I don't think, certainly in my experience, I didn't see any specific communities in Singapore that I could go and hunt in specifically for certain skills, right? Certainly go to kind of meetup events just really to network and things like that, but it wasn't it's not like all the various communities that you have like in the US, for example. It's just not at that level. So yeah, so that's again was my experience. I'm not sure, Aki or Hannah might see it a little bit different, but but that's kind of what I saw.
Okay, I think you mute, my friend.
That's how it works.
Oh,
I was just going to add that the university system is pretty robust here. So if you have junior level roles, that could be quite rich in terms of a source. But yes, no, I agree, Martin. I think those are the broad strokes.
Does Singapore have a very large percentage of people going to university? Like, what's the? I mean, that's just again, I wouldn't even say it's a stereotype. It's, not, it's a barely formed sort of thought in my mind. But I just assumed, oh, everyone goes to university here, so you're constantly producing graduates, and maybe that's a plus for white collar work. But I just wonder, okay, there's going to be a lot of work that is non-graduate work. Maybe that then becomes a minus and a crisis to recruit for people that need to do frontline work. Is that, would that be a fair characterization of the labor market and economics in Singapore? It's like lots of graduates, great, but actually lots of graduates also not great because you need lots of other types of work to be done.
Not really. I think if you look at some of the statistics, I think it's probably about 30% of I want to say Singaporeans have graduate degrees, maybe 35%. There are what, 4 universities in Singapore, or is it 3 public ones that are also a plethora of private universities as well. But generally, I think across the board, it's about 35%. And where do the other 70% go? Well, there are polytechnics here as well. So those would be more of, I think if you use the UK example, almost like a sense of apprenticeship, you have your skill in terms of a job, maybe even in engineering. But just one point, whom you mentioned, and I think Martin has articulated, white collar jobs, yeah, mostly on LinkedIn. But I think on the blue collar side, that there are a couple of job boards like fastjobs.sg. Martin mentioned Job Street as well. I think you're seeing some of these more perhaps blue collar jobs in there. And Singapore, through this particular trade union, the NTUC, they have a lot of live events in which, if let's say you're a plumber, for example, you may want to go there, get a job or something like that. So that there are various offline events as well.
Yeah, good to know. Very, very good to know. Let's switch tack. I had a really good conversation with Leon yesterday. He was telling me about his time in the army, being an elite sniper. Very interesting conversation. Hello, Leon, if he's watching this. Yeah, I should bring him on, actually. But he did tell me, oh, there's like national conscription here for boys at the age of 18, and you got to go for 2 years. So is that true, or was he just drunk? And if so, if it is true, then like, how do we factor this in? Like, for instance, is it a case? Is it like Korea, for instance, where you have to do it in a certain time frame, but it's not on 18? You can do it deferred conscription, or has everyone just gone in at 18? And you from an employer point of view, maybe that's easier because you can just start your recruiting 2 years deferred back. Like, how does the conscription work here? Does anyone know? In fact, Stephen, maybe you know.
Yeah, I had to do a 2.5-year stint in the Air Force. I wasn't a pilot. I was doing clerical administrative work straight after A levels. So that would make me about 18, 19. So yes, you do need to serve your national service within a certain time frame, around about 18, maybe around up to maybe 22, 23. I understand right now you do it for 2 years. During my time, way back when, it was 2.5 years, right? In relation to that, you also have what we call reservists, right? Which many of you know. It follows the Israeli system in which you need to serve. So once you graduate, for example, right, every year you need to go back to your military unit for a period of 2 to 3 weeks, So you need to take leave from your organization, and all companies factor in that. And you need to do it until you're either around about 45 years old, 45 to 50 years old, right? So it does take you away from work. Some companies frown upon it, but they have to accept it. It's part of the law here. But most companies, I think, accept it as part of how the system works over here, really.
Okay, so from a workforce management point of view, you've got to think about this because I mean, let's say you just accidentally hired a bunch of guys that are all the same age. Potentially, they may all be like called into reservist time at the same time, and your function might collapse because you've got nobody on hand. So it makes sense then to diversify, probably gender-wise, but also from age cohorts as the makeup of your team, because you got to, I mean, if it's every year, every guy needs to go for 2-3 weeks. That's actually a lot of man hours lost, right? There's a lot of people. As a business, you got to think about how you organize this, and even from a leadership point of view, I assume you're not exempt. If you're a head of department or whatever, it doesn't matter. You got to do it yourself. So that also means that you've got to, I don't know, have strong succession planning. You've got to have all kinds of systems in place to manage all of this.
Yeah, this reminds me of my MD in Red Hat. He's very passionate, like with his reservists. He has got 2 years left, I think. Yeah, so I think it depends on your function, I suppose. Like, because I'm more familiar with the sales, so I can speak for them. Like they are always around the clock, like Saturday, Sunday, because it's a number game, right? So fundamentally, in maybe say a tech company, it's pretty much work-life integration. You manage your time. It's not really like a punch card system. So personally, from my end, the way I see it in a tech companies, I don't particularly view any issues.
Yeah. I'm also thinking from a recruiting operations point of view. Like, we might have to factor in a reservist commitment when we're thinking about like interviewing candidates, for instance. You might have a bunch of like people that you like to be your interviewers, but you've got to figure out exactly, when are they needing to be away. Like, is there a set time, Stephen? Like this 4-week chunk, like, do people know in advance when that is, or is it kind of voluntary to the individual when they have to go and do it?
Oh, thankfully, you know about it way ahead of time, probably
Okay,
6
cool.
to 12 months. So things can be factored in. And to Hannah's point about fair interview policies in Singapore, we cannot ask candidates saying something like, how long is your reservist, right? Some might only have 1 week a year. Some might be 3 weeks, depending on the particular unit. For Leon, being a sniper, that's probably very much more sensitive. He probably needs to go in like 3 weeks, right? But for someone like me, it's probably just about a week or so.
Yeah, really interesting. By the way, Leon was very pro the idea. He enjoyed it a great deal. The idea of leaving the work. It was in a weird way.
Yeah.
Yes. You agree, Steve? It was like,
yeah,
get away from family, get away from work. It's like literally you can't do the normal day to day. You have to be back with the lads, so to say.
Yeah, I remember my car mechanic was off in the Bruneian jungles for 3 weeks, right? And he just came back and he enjoyed it, right? I think many do. Many do see it as a time away from work. Oh, I wouldn't say it's a holiday, right? Because there are responsibilities, but it is time away from work, and some do enjoy it. But it's tougher for others with families, right?
Family,
smaller
exactly.
kids, yeah.
Yeah, fascinating kind of additional twist. But again, an outsider would have no clue about this whatsoever. And you may just be caught on the hop. Like, I can totally imagine, let's say you got Hannah, you might have recruited someone from outside, senior level comes in, and they're planning away, doing this, totally don't factor in national service. And then suddenly, like, big chunks of the team disappear across the year. And I think, what?
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking though, the way I see it, if you've worked in Europe over the summer, especially in like Italy or Spain, everyone disappears for 8 weeks anyway. So this is actually a lot less onerous than the European summer.
This is true. Like, Sweden classically, like, literally don't speak to anybody in Sweden in midsummer. You just don't knock anything, nothing, you're not getting anything back. So, but you have, again, I think a lot of folks don't recognize this, and so when you're doing a recruitment plan in terms of how much time you're going to put to the task, you can't just say it's 12 months, because it isn't. There's going to be a 4 to 6 week chunk in the middle of the year for the Swedes where you're not going to do an interview. That's not happening. It's literally not going to work. So it's 11-month year, really. So yeah, you got to think about it. Okay, guys, we're moving to the end of this show. Let's just finish off with a round robin. Again, you're addressing now a person that really wants to move to Singapore. Let's say they've already made the commitment to do that, but they want to hit the ground running. They want to be really effective ASAP. This is a recruiter coming to join, let's say, your team, or coming in to join your business. What bit of advice would you going to give that person in order for them to really be successful and enjoy their time in this country? Any thoughts on this? Let's go. Let's just go as I see it, right to left. Martin, you first, and then we'll go all the way around.
So, I think, if you're coming, if you're moving to Singapore as a recruiter, what I would say, just immerse yourself in the community, right? So you just get to know, all the people that you work with. Go to lunch, go to the hawkers, just soak it all up, right? Because that's kind of where you really get to learn and understand. And I think it was Hannah who said before, there's a reason behind a reason. So I think that's what I would say. Just immerse yourself in everyone that you work with, what you do, and I think you'll just come up to speed so much faster.
Quick one on immersion. It just struck me that when I first moved from a small town in the north of England to London, big old city, like, the best thing I ever did was get involved in a flat share. Even though it's like poorer living conditions and all, sharing a toilet with 5 people, all this type of stuff. Of course, this is not, I would never go back to that type of standard. However, it was really good because it was immersive. I was never in a situation where I was isolated in my property by myself somewhere and I had to force myself to interact with people. Like you literally have to do it by making a cup of tea. Is there a similar situation in Singapore? Like, can I come in and like join a flat share? Or are flat shares not something that happens here and everyone's got their own little apartments, and actually I've got to have a different technique to get into the culture? Like what's the housing situation like? Do people share properties?
I don't really know to be honest, I don't really know the answer to that, but like if you're coming in yourself, like, and again, I think it was Aki maybe mentioned before, to get into a condo, it's quite expensive, right? So I think there are some laws around kind of renting rooms and things like that, but I don't think it's overly common from what I know. I don't know, Eve or Steve, you may know different, but that's kind of my understanding. So I don't think it's like, Australia or Europe or wherever where you can just kind of rent a room sort of stuff, right? So it's not that common.
Okay, very interesting. Hannah, your thoughts?
I mean, everything that Martin said, I think it's just immersion. I guess if there's one thing, it would be, I do see a lot of expats come into the country and they tend to kind of only hang out with expats. I think that's like a real mistake on a number of levels. I think like really trying to integrate yourself with the local community, experiencing all of the local festivals and various other things. It's just a great way to live overseas. I kind of meet some people here and I feel that they could be living anywhere. Yeah, so that would be it. And still on my list is I feel like I need to learn a little bit of Mandarin as well, which I haven't yet done. I'm quite good at the characters, but my speaking is appalling. But I'd actually wish I had done that now. Yeah.
We talked about languages yesterday. Who was that lady? Jessie, was it? She reckoned that she could speak Mandarin and Cantonese and interview candidates in all three languages. I thought, yeah, I need to get away from this lady. She's intimidating me. Okay, Steve, your thoughts, Stephen. What would your advice be to a person joining your recruitment team, let's say from outside in?
Learn Singlish. No, I'm kidding. But really, I think I echo what Martin and Hannah have said. Coming from a local, I do know many folks like foreigners, if they really try to immerse themselves locally, hawker center, going down to really local places, integrating with local colleagues and really taking the initiative. Because generally Singaporeans are more shy, quiet, right? I think, yeah, see, Eve is already smiling, right? So take the initiative, and it does take a bit of heavy lifting if you're much more, quiet, but Singaporeans really take to folks who really try to approach them a little bit more.
Really, really interesting observations, Stephen. I think if we go with the culture map kind of idea, it kind of makes the sense. Like basically East Asian culture, very kind of reserved, conservative, don't go first. Create space for others, so to say. But that might be an advantage for other cultures that are a little bit more forward, because it means your ability to integrate here is going to be more quick. Just thinking you drop a Singaporean over to London or New York or whatever, maybe they would have a different challenge, because you've got to be out there, right? You can't survive really unless you're really kind of creating your own space. So yeah, very interesting bit of advice. Go ahead and be the person that starts the fire. Eve, your thoughts for an outsider coming in, what's your advice?
Yeah, so Singaporeans or people here that tend to work long hours. My observation is they come in early, maybe they drop off the kids, they come in office 3 to 5 times a week. So my recommendation is for anyone new, just really don't feel obliged, right? Because you don't want to get burned out. Like there's a lot of things to discover, to learn. Also be careful with your spending, because if you're not careful, you might blow off a couple of $100 per night, right, Hung?
Hey, that was, yes, it was an expensive round, I have to say, but my pleasure. So not a problem.
So yeah, and Singaporeans are like what Steven said, we can be a bit shy, but we can be really helpful too. We want people to be successful. So mingle with us and don't just hang around your cliques, but also there's like meetups as well in Singapore that they can meet new people apart from your own clique, your own nationality or office people. Yeah, so that could be a good one also.
Do you know what? The best thing I signed up with ever was this random, like a meetup tool that where you didn't have a choice, as you couldn't curate it. Literally someone else like decided who you were going to meet. It wasn't a dating app. It was just say, okay, it's a reinvention of networking, where everyone hates networking events because everyone's coming in with an agenda and looking at people's labels and stuff like this. This one was like, no, turn up here. You're going to meet someone for coffee, and that was it. I got addicted to it. I was like meeting taxi drivers, ballet dancers, and stuff. Great idea. Someone should do that in Singapore. Okay, Aki, what's your final takeaway, man? Give us your advice to someone as a recruiter coming into the city first time.
Not much left. These are great takes. I think two things. One, get excited, right? Like genuinely, it's a brilliant place. Socially, culturally, it is so rich. And I think it would just be to amp them up almost as a form of onboarding. Like get excited. This is going to be great. And two is, yeah, we're saying make contacts, right? Get out there. And I think I would almost take it up a step and say, bring that humility and to even to the interview process. Like, I hope I haven't hired you if you haven't shown me that you're wanting to learn and you have the humility and the curiosity to learn. And so if we're having the conversation now about you about to embark on moving to Singapore, then I think you're in great shape. Just get excited and bring that same sense of curiosity to your move.
Yeah, fantastic. And folks, let me tell you this, I've only been here 2 days, but I can tell you it's a very easy place to be excited about. It's been a wonderful experience for me so far. I do want to make it a kind of a more regular opportunity for me to come and visit here. Great to just get the vibe and to speak to local community members here as well. So that's about it. We're over time, folks. I don't want to keep anybody further for their day. Just want to thank everyone for watching. It's been a wonderful learning experience for us. Hopefully you've got something out of it. Thank our wonderful guests, Martin Warren, Hannah Lloyd-goh, Stephen Young, Eve Goh, and Aki Taha. Thanks for joining the show. Thank you everyone for watching as well. I hope you've enjoyed it. We'll leave you there. Today is going to be a massive day of webinars for me. So I've got another one at 6. We're going to be talking about UK staffing market with our friends at JobAdder and Daxtra. And then at 11 p.m. local time, Singapore, that's how hard I'm working. I'll be doing a demo with our good friends at People GBT. David Paffenholz is going to intro and I believe debut what he claims is his agentic AI recruiter. So if you want to tune into that, you can register on those shows. Follow the channel if you're interested in being notified. If you're watching this on LinkedIn, follow my LinkedIn. Everything gets live streamed through there anyway, so you can get updated as soon as you see Hung has gone live banner on your pop-up. Okay, that's about it. I'll let everyone go. See you later, Hannah. Great to see you. Martin, see you later as well. I believe we might be having lunch. We'll take that offline. Stephen, great to see you, sir. Thanks for joining. Eve, wonderful to have your camera on. Fantastic stuff. We'll see you around. And Aki, thanks for persevering with the tech. Wonderful to get your input as well, man.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll get the chance to catch up at some point as well.
I'll think about it. It was great. Thanks for having me, Hung. Have a great day. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, hope you've enjoyed that, everyone. This is my last day in Singapore, by the way. I'll be flying to Jakarta tomorrow, and I'm going to try and do a how to hire in Indonesia if I can find some Indonesian recruiters. So Daniel, if you're watching this, loop me in, man. Let's talk to those Indonesian recruiters. I want to know how to hire